She looked like just another tourist, sun hat, tired eyes, a paperback book in her hand. Nobody noticed her. Nobody knew her name. But when both pilots collapsed at 36,000 feet, this quiet woman stood up. What happened next saved 320 lives, and revealed her true identity as a pilot. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. At the Honolulu airport, the waiting area was full of noise and tired travelers. Among the crowd stood a woman who looked like nothing special. She wore a plain hat, dark sunglasses, and a loose cotton shirt. A small travel bag hung on her shoulder. Her boarding pass showed the name Sarah Bennett, and she was heading to Los Angeles on Pacific Wings Flight 640. To anyone watching, Sarah looked like a normal tourist going home after a beach holiday. Her skin was tanned, her lips were dry from the sun, and she held an old paperback book in her hand. But Sarah was not thinking about her holiday. Her eyes moved quietly around the room. She noticed the exits. She noticed the security guards. She noticed small details that most people never see. She did this without even trying. It was simply how her mind worked. When her flight was called, Sarah walked to the gate calmly. A young couple argued about their seats. A tired mother carried a sleeping child. An old man complained about the long line. Sarah said nothing. She smiled at the flight attendant and walked to her seat, 24C, near the middle of the plane. She helped a woman lift her bag into the overhead bin, then sat down and opened her book. But her eyes were not really reading. She was watching the cabin fill with people, listening to every sound, checking every small thing without even realizing she was doing it. As the plane began to move, Sarah closed her eyes and took a slow breath. She had not flown as a passenger in a long time. In fact, she had not flown at all in almost a year. She used to be a pilot. A very good one. But after a difficult chapter in her life, she had stepped away from flying completely. This trip to Hawaii was supposed to be a quiet break, a way to rest and forget the past. She never expected that her skills would be needed again so soon. The plane took off smoothly. The captain's voice came over the speaker, calm and confident, telling passengers they would reach Los Angeles without any problems. The weather was clear. Everyone relaxed. Drinks were served. Laptops opened. The cabin settled into the normal rhythm of a long flight. But Sarah never fully relaxed. Every few minutes, she checked the wing outside her window. She listened to the engine sound. It was a habit she could not turn off, even after all this time. About 40 minutes into the flight, she felt something strange. A small shake in her seat. It was not the usual bump of turbulence. It felt like something inside the plane had changed on its own. She sat up straight and paid closer attention. A few minutes later, the seatbelt sign turned on again. An announcement asked everyone to sit down because of expected turbulence. But Sarah knew the weather reports had been clear. There was no storm anywhere near their path. Something did not add up. Then the plane shook hard. Bags fell from the overhead bins. A drink cart rolled and crashed into a seat. A child began to cry. People gripped their armrests in fear. Sarah stayed calm, but her mind was fully alert now. She looked toward the front of the plane. The cockpit door was still closed, and no new announcement had come. She turned to a flight attendant rushing past her. "Is everything all right up front?" she asked quietly. The attendant's face showed a flash of fear before she answered, "It's just turbulence, please stay seated." But Sarah could see the truth in her eyes. The crew did not know what was happening either. Minutes later, the intercom crackled with a new voice, shaky and nervous. It was not the captain. It was a flight attendant, and her words made the entire cabin go silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. If there is a licensed pilot on this flight, please make yourself known to the crew immediately." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah stood up. She did not rush. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small folder, and walked toward the front of the plane. Passengers turned to stare as she passed. She showed her pilot license to the flight attendant blocking the aisle. "My name is Sarah Bennett," she said. "I am a licensed commercial pilot with over 10 years of flying experience. I need to get into that cockpit right now." The attendant's eyes went wide with shock, but she did not argue. She opened the cockpit door and let Sarah inside. What Sarah found shocked her. Both the captain and the co-pilot were unconscious in their seats. The air inside the cockpit smelled strange, almost metallic. She guessed immediately that some kind of gas or fume had leaked into the small space and knocked both pilots out. She acted fast. She turned off the air system feeding into the cockpit and pulled out an emergency oxygen mask, placing it over the captain's face. But he did not wake up. There was no time to wait. Sarah took the pilot's seat and looked at the controls in front of her. The autopilot had switched off. The plane was slowly drifting off its planned path. Sarah's hands moved quickly and calmly over the switches, just like old memories waking up inside her. She reached for the radio and spoke in a firm, steady voice. "This is Flight 640. Both pilots are unconscious. I am a licensed pilot taking control of the aircraft. Requesting emergency guidance immediately." There was a short pause before a voice answered from ground control. "Copy that, Flight 640. We are clearing a runway for emergency landing. Stay on this frequency." Ground control then asked her to confirm the number of people on board. Sarah checked the flight manifest quickly and replied, 320 souls on board, including crew. Fuel level is stable. Aircraft is flyable but damaged. The controller's voice grew more serious after hearing the number. Every emergency team at the airport was told the same thing. 320 lives were depending on one woman they had never met, flying a damaged plane through open sky. It was a heavy weight to carry, but Sarah did not let it shake her hands. She had carried heavier weights before, in far more dangerous skies, and she reminded herself that panic never saved anyone. Only calm, careful thinking could bring this plane and its 320 passengers home safely. Back in the cabin, passengers sat in stunned silence. Nobody screamed. Nobody argued. They simply waited, staring at the closed cockpit door, hoping the stranger who had walked past them minutes ago really knew what she was doing. Sarah switched on the intercom and spoke to the passengers directly. "This is Sarah Bennett. I am a trained pilot, and I am now flying this aircraft. We are heading toward an emergency landing. Please stay seated, keep your seatbelts on, and follow the crew's instructions. We are going to get through this together." Her voice was calm, and somehow, that calm spread through the whole plane. People who had been shaking with fear began to breathe slowly. A woman near the back whispered to her husband, "She sounds like she has done this before." The flight was not easy. Warning lights flashed on the control panel. One of the hydraulic systems had lost pressure, making the plane harder to steer. The flaps on one wing were not opening fully, which meant the plane could tilt unevenly during landing. Sarah worked through each problem one at a time, just as she had been trained to do years ago. She adjusted the controls carefully, balancing the plane against its own damage. As the aircraft got closer to the airport, 2 small support planes appeared beside it, flying close to guide her in. Ground control gave her clear instructions about the runway and wind conditions. Sarah lined up the plane and began her final descent. Her hands were steady, though her heart was pounding. She had trained for moments exactly like this, but she never imagined living through one again. "Brace for landing," she said over the intercom. In the cabin, passengers held on to their seats, closed their eyes, and waited. The wheels touched the runway hard, bounced once, then settled. Sarah pulled the brakes with full force. The plane shook and screeched as it slowed down, finally coming to a stop just short of the emergency safety area. For a few seconds, the entire cabin was silent. Then, one by one, people began to breathe again. A child laughed. Someone clapped. Soon, the whole plane erupted into applause and tears of relief. Fire trucks and ambulances rushed toward the aircraft. Medical teams boarded quickly to help the unconscious pilots, who were later confirmed to be stable and recovering. Passengers were guided safely off the plane, many of them looking back at the cockpit window, trying to see the woman who had saved them. News of the landing spread fast. Reporters gathered outside the airport, eager to learn who this mysterious tourist pilot really was. Investigators later confirmed that a small technical fault had allowed toxic fumes to build up in the cockpit, causing both pilots to lose consciousness. If Sarah had not acted quickly, the outcome could have been very different. In the days that followed, Sarah avoided the cameras and interviews. She was not interested in fame. She had only done what felt natural to her. But she could not avoid the messages that poured in from passengers thanking her, from strangers inspired by her courage, and from old friends from her flying days who had not heard from her in years. One young flight attendant from the flight visited her personally to say thank you. She told Sarah that watching her take control of the emergency had inspired her to apply for flight school herself. Sarah smiled and told her she would make a wonderful pilot one day. Weeks passed, and slowly, the noise around the story faded. Sarah returned home to a quiet life, but something inside her had changed. She found herself driving past the small local airfield near her town more often, just to look at the planes taking off. One morning, she finally walked in, rented a small aircraft, and flew again for the first time in over a year. As she lifted off the ground and watched the earth grow small beneath her, she realized she had never truly stopped being a pilot. She had only needed time to remember who she was. The tourist hat and sunglasses were just a disguise for a life she had never really left behind. Months later, Sarah stood at the same airport gate where her journey had begun. A young boy ran past her, laughing, chasing his rolling suitcase. A gate agent recognized her and smiled. "You're the pilot who saved that flight," he said. Sarah simply smiled back. "I was never just a tourist," she said, and walked toward the window to watch another plane rise into the sky, no longer afraid of what waited above the clouds.